Good morning, students. Welcome to Class 8 Social Science. This is Worksheet 4. I hope, students, you all are safe, fit, and healthy at home. Today, students, I am going to discuss with you History, Colonization of India, Lesson 2nd, and this is my video lecture part 1. In this chapter, we'll be studying about the arrival of the trading companies to India by land route and sea route. How these companies did trading in India, and from trade to territory, how did they land up? Fine, student? By the second half of the 18th century, a new power was emerging on the political horizon. That was the British East India Company. Fine, student? The arrival of the trading companies was between the middle of the 16th century and the middle of the 18th century. That period, that time, the last Mughal ruler Aurangzeb was there, and he expired. Aurangzeb expired in the 1707. Between that period, already the traders from the British island had landed to India land. The trading was steadily moving and expanding because India was the fertile land. Fine. This was due to even many different activities which we'll be covering in this chapter. When these British islands, European companies, they came to India, they came from via Cape of Good Hope from the Indian Ocean towards Bombay, Madras and Calcutta they entered. Fine, student, that is from the western and the eastern coast. Now, when this British East India Company came in the 18th century, that is the second half of the 18th century, there was many political powers of European companies which was there on our land. This East India Company in 1600, they acquired a charter from the ruler of England, that was Queen Elizabeth I. Queen Elizabeth I granted a charter, passed a permission, sole right to trade with the East, to the East India Company. This means that no longer the trading groups in England could compete with the East India Company. Fine. This charter also helped the company to trade fearlessly in East without any competitors from England. So this charter enabled the company to look for new lands from which the company could buy goods at cheap rate and get back to the European land and sell them at a higher price. This was the company's charter which Queen Elizabeth had granted the East India Company. Fine. Now what happened? Do you think, students, was it possible for East India Company to trade in India, whereas the East India Company, when they came, by that time already through this route from the Cape of Good Hope, Portuguese had entered, and this discovery of the sea route was done by the great sailor. He had established their presence in the western coast of India, and his name was Vasco da Gama. This Portuguese explorer who had discovered this route was in 1498, and by the 17th century, the Dutch had explored its possibilities of trade in India in the Pulicat in 1595, and the French had entered in 1664 in Pondicherry. So when East India Company came, there were already European countries in India and they were doing trading. When East India Company came, it also came with the same vision of doing trading, exporting goods, the same which the other companies were interested in buying, that was the fine qualities of cotton, silk, indigo and spices. Now students, when all these companies are into interest of the same good, there will be competition and demand. When there was too much of demand of these materials, the goods price raised higher. But what was the vision of these companies? That they are going to purchase at a lesser price and sell at a higher price, which did not happen. When it did not happen, what was the scenario? The company, all these companies, they had a trade war. That means the competition between the European countries led them to a fierce battles, and this led them to block the sea route. In order to safeguard each other, the companies, they blocked the routes. They even sank each other's ship. This was the harm they were putting up on each other, and prevented rival ships from moving in with supplies of goods to the European country. Trade was carried on at that period of time with arms and protected fortifications. At that period of time, British East India Company was finding it difficult to separate trade from politics. So today student, I have started from 16th century of East India Company's charter permission and how did they face the conflict, the trade war, and landed up with the fortification. Thank you student. Be safe and take care at home.